What's up, everyone? So, as you can see, there's still a ton of snow on the ground, so I'm not going to be making any digging videos anytime soon because I don't want to dig through a foot of snow on top of digging through the dirt to get to bottles. So, with that being said, I figured I'd make part 2 of the What Bottles Are Selling video. So, let's get into it.
First is this lot of 2 Jackson, Ohio soda bottles that sold for $18 plus shipping. I believe both of these had some minor condition issues, but they still displayed decently. Next is this lot of 4 very common Weedman Brewery bottles that sold for $15 plus shipping. Next is this Chas E. Bagley Druggist bottle from Greenwood, South Carolina. It sold for $40. When I first found it, I thought that South Carolina Druggist bottles would be better than the Ohio Druggist bottles, but I guess that's not the case because I can get $40 out of most of the Ohio Druggist bottles outside of the Druggist bottles from really large towns such as Cincinnati, Cleveland, Toledo. Some of those towns, the Druggist bottles aren't as good, but for a lot of the small town druggists or medium town druggists, you can actually get twice that. But there are some small towns that don't have as big of a collector base, so they may not go for as much. So the bottles that actually seem to go for more than average when it comes to the Carolinas are actually the soda bottles. A lot of the soda bottles from down in those areas sell easier and they sell for more than the Ohio ones do. If you have any Cincinnati, Ohio Crown Tops, here's one to check for. The Ohio Union Brewing Company out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Every one of these that I've seen has always been tooled top and has always sold pretty fast for me. This one brought $22 plus shipping. Here's another Crown Top beer to look out for. The Cincinnati Brewing Company out of Hamilton, Ohio. This particular one doesn't say Hamilton, Ohio, but the clear or aqua variants with the same front design do. This one sold for $15 plus shipping. Next is this H for Hodge soda from Cincinnati, Ohio. It's a squat soda, so it's earlier than what most people dig. So years ago, I paid $25 plus shipping for it. Then I decided to sell off all the bottles that I didn't personally dig outside of Middletown, Ohio bottles. So I ended up selling it for $50 plus shipping. So after shipping the first time, I think I paid around $32 to $35 for it. So I made probably around $10 to $15 profit after fees. Sometimes family members buy bottles, and that is the case with these old bottles out of Dayton, Ohio. Even though they're fairly common and look almost identical to the most common beer from Dayton, the Dayton Breweries Company, these old brewery bottles consistently sell. This lot of 3 brought $35 plus shipping. Next up is a bottle that looks like a super common bottle, but isn't. This is a Pinehurst Vineyard Company from Pinehurst, North Carolina. So these look almost identical to the super common Garrett and Company wine bottles, but these are less common, and they always sell. This one brought $20 plus shipping. Next up is a lot of 3 Middletown, Ohio bottles. These are all sodas, and the fairly common sodas from Middletown don't seem to sell for much, at least if they're embossed, but if you get the scarcer ones, they do seem to bring more, especially if they're ACLs. So this lot of fairly common sodas brought $30 plus shipping. Now here's a tough variant of an otherwise common bottle. Most people have seen the common side embossed 3-in-1 oil bottles, but not many have seen or dug the octagonal shaped 3-in-1 oil bottles. So this one brought $25 plus shipping. And I think it might have had like a little lip chip or something like that. Here's a lot of 3 jars that sold. Brockway, Dre, and Presto. This lot brought $30 plus shipping. They changed the international shipping program to where the buyer doesn't pay me the full international shipping. Instead, the buyer pays whatever it costs to ship to someplace in Illinois. So I don't know if the buyer gets a better deal or if that's just what the buyer pays me for my listing, and then they pay the rest to some other organization. But it works out because I don't mind international sales now, since the shipping isn't going to be so high, because at least the fees won't be too high to make it worth it then. Anyway, this lot sold for 30 plus shipping. Next up is this nice pre-prohibition Kenton Brewing Company out of Kenton, Ohio, and it sold for $60 plus shipping. Next is this nice Cincinnati, Ohio milk bottle, the J.H. Fielman Dairy out of Cincinnati, Ohio. I can't remember if this one came out of the cistern or the dump, but it did have at least one condition issue, and I believe I made an agreement with my tumbler guy that he would tumble a bottle for me in exchange for receiving this one, but I guess he didn't like it because of that condition issue. I can't remember if it was a bruise and chip or if it was just a chip or just a bruise, but regardless, it still sold for $20 plus shipping. So I think he gave it back to me, and that was how I ended up listing it on there. One thing I've learned over the years is that if you get an embossed West Virginia soda bottle, chances are it's worth more and it'll sell faster than an Ohio soda bottle. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, that's how it goes. So with that being said, here's a Parkersburg Bottling Works out of Parkersburg, West Virginia. Has a nice Art Deco pattern, and it brought 25 plus shipping. Next up is another damaged bottle. This one's a pretty tough one. It's a Zwick's Pharmacy out of Covington, Kentucky, and it has a Red Cross symbol embossed on it, which makes it even more desirable. So at first I thought it had a glass flaw, but then after I looked at it more and more, I thought, well, now I'm thinking it may be a bruise. And I believe the buyer thought so too, because I think the reason why I'm not marked as a 5-star seller when it comes to the description is because this buyer gave me a lower rating. But regardless, this one brought 65 plus shipping. Originally I had it higher because it was a rare bottle, but since it was possible that it had a bruise instead of a glass flaw, I figured I would lower the price. Of course, with Jackson, Ohio bottles being pretty sought after these days, figured I'd show another lot of them that sold. 2 hobble skirts from there and a Jackson soda bottle. I believe Jackson Bottling Company or Bottling Works out of Jackson, Ohio. This lot sold for $20 plus shipping. And I'm pretty sure that the soda bottle that's not a Coke bottle was damaged, so not too shabby. Here's a less common aqua straight-sided Coke. This one is from Columbus, Ohio, and you can tell by the price because you see the ambers everywhere. But the aquas are not so common. The ambers go for $40, $50 all day long in good condition. But this one brought $70 damaged. So yeah, this Aqua Heel Script Coke from Columbus is a scarcer variant of an otherwise common straight-sided Coke bottle. Next up is this nice Center Script straight-sided Coke from Springfield, Ohio. It was early machine made, and it brought $70 plus shipping. Alrighty, here's a new category. How about an ink bottle? A nice olive cone ink, and it brought $35 plus shipping. Here's a nice one. Not a lot of panel touches from Ohio, but here's one. It's a fairly common one. The Decker Bottling Company, Dayton, Ohio. This one is more of an aqua color. It brought $40 plus shipping. Next up is a fairly common West Virginia brewery bottle. The Fayette Brewing and Ice Company out of Montgomery, West Virginia. It brought $25 plus shipping. Here's another brewery bottle. This one's more common. The Portsmouth Brewing and Ice Company out of Portsmouth, Ohio. It brought $30 plus shipping. I will say that these have went down in recent years, as I currently have a lot of 3 on eBay for 50 plus shipping, which would be just under $17 a piece. So that's a much better price than $30 for one bottle. So the market's been saturated with those, I believe. But sometimes bottles will bounce back, so maybe it'll happen, maybe not. We'll see. Here are the first milk bottles I've sold for this video. This is a nice set of Townsend West Dairy Company bottles out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Townsend West is one of the most common dairy bottles to find. But despite that, this lot still brought $45 plus shipping. You got an instant set of them. There are some scarcer variants of this dairy, such as the earlier slug-plated variants. Those are a lot harder to find. These variants are pretty common. Next, we have a lot of 5 different Dayton, Ohio extract bottles. Some of these extracts are kind of scarce, so even though they did sell for $25 plus shipping, I feel like whoever bought them got a pretty good deal for as scarce as a couple of them are. For example, the small sounders and the rectangular Royal Remedies a little bit scarcer. You just don't see them around as much, but they do turn up from time to time. The others are pretty common. Next is a Cost Pharmacy, and from my research, I believe it is from Indianapolis, Indiana, but I could be wrong. But regardless, it still sold and brought $20 plus shipping. I was thankful to sell it for that, because some of these bottles with just a random name like that, but no city and state, can be hard to sell. So that was a pretty good sell for me. I guess that made up for the extract bottles not bringing as much as I hoped for. Some of these I did not screenshot the listings as they sold, so I had to go back and use the TerraPeak tool to research what they sold for. So I screenshot where a bunch of my listings sold, and so these will look different on the screen, but here they are. The first is a Schwind Brewing Company out of Dayton, Ohio. It sold for $24 plus shipping. Next up is a lot of 4 Gus A. Cigarettes Dayton, Ohio Hutch bottles. And most, if not all, of these were damaged, which is why it went for the low price of $35 plus shipping. After this, I put together a lot of 3 Decker Hutches out of Dayton, Ohio. And I know at least one of them were damaged, if not more. And they brought $64 plus shipping. And then the one that brought $40 by itself already went over, so we'll go on to the next bottles. Next is a slot of 2 John Clee Hutches out of Dayton, Ohio. I sold for $15 plus shipping. These were sold as part of a lot deal, so that's why I only charged $15 plus shipping for them. And they were both in pretty rough shape. I don't think I sold the bottom 2 bottles. I may have sold the Cigarettes Hutch, but I can't remember for sure. But the Elm Hill Farm cottage cheese jar, I definitely didn't sell. Next is one of the better Ohio Crown Top beers. Most beers that are Crown Tops sell for 25 to 35 tops, and that's the scarcer ones or the more sought after ones, while most of them sell for less than that. But this one is a pretty sought after one, and it's a pretty scarce one. Dayton, Ohio has a lot of harder to get Crown Top beers. This one is the Shantz and Schwinn Brewing Company out of Dayton, Ohio, and it sold for $70 plus shipping. We already went over the lot of 5 extract bottles earlier in this video, so on to the next. I'm sure, as you can tell, straight-sided Cokes are one of the top sellers in my eBay store. They usually don't last long. Even the damaged ones, such as this one. This one had a massive chip in the heel. In fact, it was so massive, it took at least one of the letters completely off the bottle. Despite that, it still brought 25 plus shipping. Here is another Dayton special. The Ad Chance Brewing Company, Dayton, Ohio. This one has an applied Baltimore loop top and likely dates to 1890 to 1900. And despite having damage, it still brought $64 plus shipping. So that's pretty good for a damaged beer. Next up is another Dayton special. Jenkins Cut Rate Drugstore out of Dayton, Ohio. And while this is the most common druggist from there, as in true druggist, because I don't count those Souders or Royal Remedy extract bottles as druggist because they're not, it still brought 30 plus shipping, and it actually sold within 24 hours of me listing it at that price. So with that being said, I believe that there's a high demand for those particular bottles, even though they are fairly common. So if you have one, I think now is a good time to list it. Next up is another dairy bottle, and yes, it's from Dayton. The Ohio Bottled Milk Company, Dayton, Ohio. This is an example of a bottle that would look much better tumbled. The glass is all sick and hazy, to the point to where you can't even see through the bottle hardly. But despite that, it still brought $75 plus shipping because it's a pretty tough Dayton, Ohio bottle to get. This one could have brought 100 or more if it was tumbled. Next up, we have a lot of two Alt Brewing Company bottles that sold. One was a quart and one was a pint. And the quart was damaged, but they still brought $40 plus shipping. Next, I found a scarce variant of a Hollenkamp from Dayton, Ohio. And it was one of them that said Products Company instead of Brewing Company. So I decided to auction that one off since I was unsure of how it would do. And it got bid up to $41 plus shipping, so not too shabby for a heel embossed bottle. Then we have a Gusset Cigarettes Hutch out of Dayton, Ohio, and it brought $40 plus shipping. Condition does matter. In this case, you could see why, because the common heel scripts from Dayton, Ohio are normally $50 bottles, but I dug an exceptionally nice one out of the dump, and it brought $80 plus shipping. So that's the most I've ever sold one of those for, of that particular variant. And then the center one wasn't my listing, so I'm not going to cover that. But then the one below that was a lot of two Decker Hutch bottles from Dayton, Ohio. And those brought $50 plus shipping. It's actually been so long since I've listed those and any other Decker Hutches that I'm tempted to start listing them again because it's been quite a while. And they may start selling again because the last ones I put on there, they sat and sat and sat before finally selling. So I wanted to give the market a break on listing those so that they would retain their value. Next is a Southeast Ohio special, a Gloucester Bottling Works from Gloucester, Ohio. And this one was damaged. It still brought $20 plus shipping though. Next up is a clear medicine bottle that's interesting. Mellow, the only true cathartic. And it did not have a city or state listed, but according to some research I did, the company that made that was located in Indianapolis, Indiana. And it sold for $20 plus shipping. Alright, let's go over some Richmond, Indiana bottles. So first is William H. Mink Hutch out of Richmond, Indiana. It brought $25 plus shipping. It's one of the more common hutches from that town. Next is a scarcer bottle, an LB Thurman out of Richmond, Indiana. And this was an aqua quart. And it's interesting that it sold because I put mine on there for $25 and someone else put theirs on there for $25, but mine was damaged. And despite that, the buyer actually bought mine over the other person's, which was kind of weird, but hey, I'll take it. So $25 plus shipping after fees, probably around $15 to $17. Last is the Richmond, Indiana straight-sided Coke bottle. Straight-sided Cokes from that town are kind of rare. You just don't see them as much anymore. This one was machine made, and it brought 68 plus shipping despite having numerous condition issues, so that tells you if you get a good one, it could bring $100. One thing that I like about eBay is you can leave bottles on there for years, and you don't have to pay no rent like you would if you were to put these same bottles in an antique store booth. But one of the other things I like is that sometimes you can list stuff and they sell within 24 hours. And sometimes they sell even quicker than that. Such was the case with this Zarinhurst Farms bottle out of Germantown, Ohio. Germantown's a fairly small town, and there's a decent collector base from there. But these bottles are super common. But despite that, someone must have been really looking for one, because if I remember correctly, this sold within 30 minutes of listing it. Brought $65 plus shipping. Now let's go over some Cincinnati, Ohio bottles. Anyone who's dug a turn of the century dump or older has dug something from Cincinnati, so you may want to pay attention to what's selling from that town. So first is a soda water and ginger ale company out of Cincinnati, and it brought 35 plus shipping despite being damaged. I believe it had a lip and base chip. Next is a false Schneider out of Cincinnati, shoulder embossed Baltimore loop blob top. It brought $25 plus shipping. Next up is the Gurkey Brewing Company out of Cincinnati, Ohio. I actually bought this one and a lot of other beer bottles from the Cincinnati area in an antique mall, and I didn't pay a whole lot for the lot, and I think I made my money back with just this one bottle. It was a pint Baltimore loop blob, and it sold for $80 plus shipping, but it was one of the nicer looking Gurkeys I've seen. It wasn't sick or anything. I've talked about Cincinnati Crown Tops that sell before, but here's more proof of the Wetterer Brewing Company bottles being good sellers. Another one sold for $18 plus shipping. Then there's another Cincinnati Brewing Company out of Hamilton, Ohio. This one brought $25 plus shipping. Next is one of the most common Baltimore loop tops from Cincinnati, Ohio. The Christian Moorline Brewing Company, Cincinnati, Ohio. It brought $45 plus shipping. Then I sold another damaged Cincinnati Soda Water and Ginger Ale Company bottle. That was a Hutch, and it brought $35 plus shipping like the previous one did. Alright, now I'm going to go back to a Jackson, Ohio bottle. The Whipple Creamery, Jackson, Ohio. And yes, that's a milk bottle. And that's the only one on this list that was mine, so that's the only one I'm going to cover. It brought $20 plus shipping, despite having a massive crack in it. So that's how good a lot of these Jackson bottles are. Even with big cracks on them, most of them will still sell, unless it's something super common. So I just got done showing you a bunch of listings that you could see the prices, but you didn't see the pictures, or they were so small you couldn't tell what the bottle looked like, really. But now I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to show you some pictures, but somehow I didn't screenshot what the prices were, but I do remember. So the first is this nice local bottle from my hometown. The Sebald Brewing Company, Middletown, Ohio. And despite being one of the most boring looking beers in Ohio, it still brought $45 plus shipping. Next is the Clark Fruit Jar out of Cleveland, Ohio. And this is the most expensive thing I've ever sold from Cleveland. They're semi-common jars, ground lip, lightning style closure. And it brought $90 plus shipping. It did sit there a while though before it brought that. Next is a broken bottle. If you post a broken bottle in a lot of these Facebook groups, you're going to have all these so-called experts telling you, oh, it's worthless. If a bottle's broken, that means it's worthless. Well, while most bottles that are broken are not worth anything, there are exceptions, and a lot of bottle experts fail to mention that. And this is one of them. It's a tough, early center embossed Bavarian Brewing Company out of Covington, Kentucky. Most of these you see are just embossed on the shoulder and boring looking. But not this nice center slug plated one. It was a quart-sized bottle, and it brought $25 plus shipping. And yes, the top is just sitting there on top of it. I dug it in 2 pieces and brought it home and put it together. So I'm glad someone would appreciate it. Next up is this lot of 2 Lion Brewery bottles out of Cincinnati, Ohio. The one has a slug plate and the other does not, so 2 different variants. Both are pint-sized and had Baltimore loop tops, and this lot sold for $35 plus shipping. Next up is the Windisch Mohlhauser Brewing Company out of Cincinnati, Ohio. A lot of 4 of them. This lot brought $35 plus shipping. Next is a Herman Lachman Brewing Company out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Another one of the less common crown tops. These are shoulder embossed. They say Lachman on the shoulder, and then all the rest of the embossing is on the base. And you can see that in the picture. Anyway, it sold for $25 plus shipping. And I believe it sat a while, but it still brought that. Next is a Cincinnati, Ohio straight-sided Coca-Cola bottle. It brought $50 plus shipping. Next is one of the squat sodas that I bought years ago and resold. I believe I paid, I think it was $42 or $49, something like that years ago. And then I resold it on eBay because I decided to focus on Middletown, Ohio bottles only as far as buying goes, and the rest I would just keep some of the cool Ohio stuff that I dug myself. Anyway, I relisted it at $65 and it sold for that, so I made a little bit off it, not a lot after fees because the fees take out so much, but it was worth it. Next up is a lot of 4 Hamilton, Ohio soda bottles. The knee highs are pretty common. The high grade's pretty common. The shoulder embossed Pabst is a little bit scarcer. The Pabst company was very successful and made tons of bottles, but some variants are less common, and that is one of them. Anyway, this lot brought $30 plus shipping. Next up is a Capital City Brewing Company out of Indianapolis, Indiana. And after sitting for a while, it brought $35 plus shipping. Next is a Lizzie Brewing Company out of Peoria, Illinois. And it brought $25 plus shipping. It was actually a scarcer variant that's center embossed. A lot of these are shoulder embossed. Alright, I think I'm about done with this video because I've covered quite a bit. So I'm going to put one last one on here. And this is going to be the most I've ever sold a bottle for on eBay. And it is this one. C.J. Leverin's Bottling Works, Danville, Illinois. So I traveled to Richmond, Indiana to dig on this construction site, and they dug a massive trench through a dump that was dug really hard to put some kind of pipe in. And they dug so far down that they dug clear through the dump and then through a bunch of limestone. But if they moved over a little bit, they could have dug down and not hit anything but dump, because the dump jumped from around 8 foot deep to 30 plus foot deep, who knows, because they dumped over a cliff years ago and filled that whole cliff up with dump. Anyway, when I found it, I thought, oh, that's cool. I think it's a quart blob soda or Baltimore Loop soda. And I've seen a lot of quart Baltimore Loop beers, so those are fairly common to find in Ohio and Indiana, but you just don't see many quart-sized sodas to begin with. And when you do, they're almost always crown tops. So when you find a pre-crown top soda bottle, it's usually a scarcer bottle. But the only issue was this thing was sick. It was in one of these incinerator-like dumps almost, where the bottles come out stained so badly they're actually etched, and some of them have like tiny spiderweb-like cracks going all over them from being in a burned up layer. So I didn't think this was going to bring a whole lot, but I still wanted to try to go for at least 75 plus shipping, because after fees I figured around 60 profit. So that's what I did. I threw it up for auction at 75 plus shipping, and to my surprise, it started getting bids instantly. I think it got bid up to like $87 or something, and then there was a long pause. It just sat there at that price for a long time, up until the end, and then all of a sudden I heard a lot of noise on there, and I looked, and that thing got bid up to $393 plus shipping. So I was like, holy crap, that was impressive. So yeah, that was my best sale ever on eBay. And that's why I would advise you to auction your listing if you don't know what it's worth, if there's no similar listings I've sold, because you never know. Sometimes bottles that you think could be worth $20 end up being $200. But it can also be the opposite way. Like I bought a milk from Arcade, Florida at a reasonable price here in Ohio, and the last one that sold brought $600. Well, I tried listing it for, I think, around that, and I kept lowering the price. And I actually didn't even get $100 for it. It was sick, but I couldn't believe it only brought $20. I think I auctioned it for $20 or $25, and that was like all it brought. So, are you kidding me? So, yeah, you just never know how the market's going to go with bottles. So it's pretty unpredictable.